Hi folks, Brendan Kennedy coming to you from the Legacy Club at Aliqua Lakes on behalf of friends and neighbors and Markham Woods neighbors. And today's topic is greenside bunker play. People have fear and phobia as they get into a bunker, but really there's, outside of some rare circumstances like a really bad lie, there's really no need to be fearful, and I'm confident that with a few adjustments you can develop the skill to get out of a bunker in one swing every time. So having said that, I'll just go over some of the fundamentals as I see it for good bunker play. So first off, what we want to control, or what a good bunker player controls with amazing precision and regularity, is what would be considered the entry point, or where their club enters the sand in relation to the ball. So a good way for you to get a feel for that is to go to your practice area, go in the bunker, literally draw a line in the sand, set up to this line, put your club down on the line, and make swings where your goal is to hit right on the line. And without even telling you how to do it, I think you take enough swings, you're going to make certain adjustments instinctively that are going to bring this club closer and closer to hitting that line. And I would say, if you can do that, you're probably demonstrating good technique without even thinking about it. But what are some of the things that can help us hit this line or get that entry point consistent more often? And where should that entry point be in relation to the ball? I would prescribe about 2 inches. This is one of the only shots, if not the only shot, where we actually want to hit behind the ball. So this line that I'm drawing would be set about 2 inches behind the ball I'm trying to get out. So I'm going to adopt a wider stance than normal. Usually with short game shots, the stance is fairly narrow for chipping and pitching, but for lob shots and bunker shots, it's a wider base. And by the way, the techniques used to get out of the bunker effectively greenside, pretty much identical for how to hit a high lofted, short traveling lob shot. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I've got a fairly wide base. I'm gonna set my weight to the left, and I'm gonna try to keep it there. I use the image of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Lean the tower, your whole body, to the left, and keep it there. Next, the actual ball position should be forward in your stance, maybe opposite your left heel. Now you can experiment with that. If you are making swings at this line and you find that you're entering the sand maybe slightly behind but very close to it, well, you could play your ball close to that point, because the main thing is entering the sand in relatively the same spot more time after time. So the ball's going to be forward, wider base, weight to the left. I want to set up with the club having loft in it. So there's a difference between adding loft, true loft, and decreasing loft. And that's different from opening or closing the club face. So what I suggest is putting more loft into the club at address with the ball played forward. Now you'll notice that the butt of the club here is pointed at my belt buckle. In other words, it's behind the leading edge of the club. So I'm leaning it slightly backwards to add loft. So the setup might feel awkward. Now, if you're in the wrong setup position and you feel like the club's back here, move your body to the right until this is pointing at your belt buckle. We don't want it forward pressed, nor do we want it leaning back too far. It's really kind of at my midsection. Now, when it comes to time to execute the stroke, I want to elevate this club up in the air. And I want to do that without shifting my weight or moving my body. So I, for instance, like to keep my arms relaxed and soft, almost bent. I don't want to have a wide, long arc to this backswing, because then the club would come in too shallow, it'll hit too far behind, or it'll scull the ball. So I keep my weight to the left, put loft in the club, so the grooves are looking more skyward. Whatever angle I set going back, I'm going to release. So this is not a firm wristed holding on to the club. This is swinging the club head and actually letting it pass the body. So I'm going to make a couple swings at this line, doing those few things. Up. Now I hit a little behind, so I'm going to lean a little more left. That's a good one. Now the part of the club that I feel is making contact with the sand is actually this trailing edge, the back of the club. I'm not digging in with the leading edge. That's important. As far as the setup and alignment is concerned from this down the line view, I'm not an advocate of opening the body lines and aiming the body to the left. Oftentimes it's taught that way. I'm an advocate of a fairly square body alignment. In other words, I'm aiming my body lines parallel to the direction I want the ball to travel. I've got the ball forward in my stance, as I showed here. I'm putting loft in the club, and I'm going to swing it in a fairly up and down motion that's also in a fairly straight line. What you don't want to do is swing around your body into out. This is one of the steepest motions in the game. So I want to keep my face lofted, my weight to the left, and swing up and down to the entry point. And I always want to give it enough follow through to get the ball out. So I don't want to stop at impact. Sometimes you can even take a full follow through just to make sure that because you're hitting behind the ball that there's enough force to get the ball out. So I'll hit one more. Again, ball forward in my stance, wide base. I'm even digging my feet in a little bit to make sure I'm anchored. I've got the face lofted. The leading edge here is looking straight towards the hole. My weight's to the left. Now I bring the club up and down to the entry point, and I try to let my body rotate on through with it. So those are the basics, the fundamentals of good bunker play. But once you get that entry point consistent, the way that you go about hitting different distances is a feel thing. It's determining how much energy or force you need to put through the sand for different distances. But we are not trying to vary that entry point. So that's your main thing. Get consistent with where your club's entering the sand. We also want to control how deep the club goes into the sand. We don't want it entering in the right spot, but continuing down to Middle Earth. We've got to let the club do some swinging, and that's how it gets back out of the sand. If I hold on to these angles and I'm pulling on the grip, I won't have any bounce. I'll be using the leading edge and I'll tend to dig too deep. So those would be the basics as I see them. Okay, so we're now here with Alessandra. We're going to check out her bunker technique and make some suggestions if there's any points to be made. Let's go ahead and have you hit a few shots there. And what loft are you using, by the way?
56.
Okay. So the most common lofts used from the bunker are 56 or 60. Some might have a 54 or a 58. I was using a 60 for this particular shot. Doesn't really matter. The club selection is the club that you're most confident hitting. So she's using a 56. Okay. Little thin. Very nice. That ball had a lot of spin on it. So her entry point there was perfect. Obviously the one before, not as good. But she actually hit closer to the ball with her entry point, closer than 2 inches. That's part of the formula for making the ball spin the most. The farther we hit behind it, even if it gets out, the sand tends to cascade over the ball like a wave, so it comes out rolling with top spin. She just hit very close to the ball while still entering the sand behind the ball, so that ball took one hop and just stopped dead, so it had a lot of backspin. That was perfect. Perfect. Same thing. Beautiful entry point. Ball was spinning. Now that ball carried a little farther than the one before, although the entry point was about the same. So she probably just put a little too much energy or speed through the sand. So when you're hitting really good bunker shots like that, that's when you start to try to regulate that speed. It's kind of like measuring miles per hour. Sometimes we have to feel like we're swinging 100. Sometimes we feel like 50 for different distances. But that was perfectly hit in terms of entry point and technique. Very good. Almost in. That time you could maybe even see, same entry point, she softened up her follow through a little bit, so she took some of the acceleration out. It's not to say that she stopped at the ball or decelerated. Basically the swing was about the same length, but it had a little softer speed to it, a little less. So the ball didn't come out as hot as the previous one, didn't carry as far. Very good. Did you hit a little farther behind that?
Yeah.
Okay. That time, you see the great flow on her follow through. So she got that one out. It came out, it landed short of the hole, but it released a little more, it had more roll. The reason is she hit a little farther behind the ball that time. So again, that would get more stuff, sand in between the club face and the ball. So that would act as a barrier or limit the amount of backspin. So that ball came out rolling, releasing. Some will call that a chunk and run, where a tour pro will actually hit a little further behind the ball than normal because they want to get that ball coming out and rolling farther. But if they want to carry it and stop it on a dime, they're entering very, almost scary close to the ball. But you can see a textbook setup here. Perfect entry point. The ball had a lot of spin, carried it a little far, no big deal. So she's got great technique. Obviously she's not in the competitive world anymore. She's working, so she's not practicing as much as she would if she was trying to compete. But all I would tell her is your technique is awesome.
Thank you.
just practice is what you would need just to get your feel back for distance control. You hit the first one, that's going to happen. But the rest since then have been good entry points, lots of spin, just varying distances. That's a feel thing. The technique is good. Okay, so just a little recap on bunker play. One thing to remember, whether it's the bunker or anywhere around the green, that bounce is your friend. Bounce is basically this part of the club on the back is the trailing edge of it, whereas on the front side, this is the leading edge. So the difference between this leading edge height and this trailing edge depth, that's your bounce angle. And it's measurable. Like this one has 14 degrees. That's this angle from drop down from the leading edge and then taken over to where it hits. That's 14 degrees of bounce. So that bounce is deployed when we add loft to the club or open it a little bit. This is the part of the club that we want to hit the sand. So that's really important. I think a lot of times when I see people struggle, they don't set up with enough loft. They might even set up with a square face and the hands forward pressed, and then they drag the handle. We want to not only set up with the club face more lofted or looking more skyward, but we also want to let the club head swing and release as if we're throwing it. This is not a firm wristed hang-on shot. So I set up ball forward, wide stance, dig in a little bit, weight to the left, and I want to keep it there. Club face lofted. In other words, the grip is slightly behind the leading edge. Whatever angle I create on the backstroke, I want to release or get rid of, so that basically my address position and my impact position look the same. So I wouldn't want to start off with the club face lofted, set this angle and then hang on to it. I wouldn't have enough loft. And also I wouldn't be able to utilize the bounce. So one way, again, to consider bounce, if I stick my right hand out there and I lay my palm to the sky, that's loft. Here's my grooves. I want to hit the sand with the back of my hand or my knuckles. So when I come through, it's like that. The loft is still in the club face. In other words, if I brought it back down to the ground, I could put a Coke can or a wine glass on it. Never rolls over. Okay, loft, left, up, down, and let it go through. Try those things and they should help.